Well, good morning, Till Plains. Good to be here with the new Carlisle family this Sabbath morning. So thankful that we have this opportunity to worship in a week that the weather's trying to, of course, figure out as we're in this transition period whether we're still in winter or whether we're in spring. I know today it does not feel like springtime, but we've had times during the week, and that's what's kind of the bummer is we hit the weekend and it's like it's always winter, but during the week we have spring, and it's like, but I'm working during the week. I can't enjoy the spring weather during the week, and on the weekend when I'm more free, it's wintertime. It's like, anyways. Glad to be together. So glad, Brian and Jennifer, you're worshiping with us here in New Carlisle. They're in Springfield. Seth, so glad that you're worshiping with us. We were glad that you helped with us with Operation Hunger. I pray that you're enjoying worship and study there in Springfield. Also, we have a couple of other guests there. We got Marilyn and Sue who are visiting, and we're glad that you're with us this Sabbath morning to be able to worship. A thought here, or just a reminder, it's something in the announcements. When we put the announcements together, that was at the beginning of the week. And so for the women's tea, it was said that we have half the spots filled. We have 2/3 of the spots filled now. There's 25 spaces left. So if that's something that you're wanting to attend, make sure that you go online and register for that. Just looking forward, well, I personally not as looking forward to it because I won't be there for some reason. It's like it's something that I'm not going to identify that way for that day just to attend. But I know that Heidi, who is speaking that day, you will be blessed with the message she has. And I know the ladies are working hard. Thankful to our Delaware Women's Ministries and the social committee up there that are putting things together. I know that Karen has been working with Cindy to get the menu together, and that they've been working with Terry and Dusty up there to make sure that things go well, and the other ladies, of course, are helping to contribute to things. So looking forward to that event taking place on what date? 7? Okay, just making sure. So we're glad for that. And as the pastor and as a dad, I'm going to take the privilege now to wish my daughter a happy birthday. Those here in New Carlisle know she turned 18 yesterday. So those in Springfield can wish her a happy birthday, as embarrassing as that may be for her. But anyways, she is celebrating her birthday. She has turned 18, and of course, as parents, we're very glad and happy and have been blessed with her. And so just keep her in your prayers, because this is her senior year of high school, and she's, of course, getting ready to do the college thing. So all of those things together. But as we're here this morning, and as exciting as all that may be, we're dealing with this topic of rebels without a clue. And as I was talking about that with Ron there in the foyer here at New Carlisle this morning, he said, rebels without a cause. There was that movie with James Dean in it. And the fact is that title just doesn't work for this sermon, because rebel without a cause is a lot different than a rebel without a clue, right? Yes. And as we saw our text for this morning that was there from Numbers 16, and there in verse 3, let's read this together. It's on the screen. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Great Heavenly Father, this Sabbath morning, as we take a look at this rebellion of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, help us to see principles that we can put into place for our lives, understand how this fits into the bigger picture of the great controversy that is being waged between Satan and you and your kingdom. And that, Father, to recognize that you are over all things and are victorious in all things. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's start a little bit towards the end of the story. The end of the story definitely for Moses. There in Deuteronomy 34:4, we find that Moses is there, and he's been taken to the top of Mount Nebo, and he's there, and he's looking west over the land. Predominantly, that's the direction he's looking. You can see the north, you can see the south. And as he is there, God is talking to him and says, here at this end of the road journey for Moses, he says, this is the land of which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. And notice here at the last part, he says, I have caused you to see it with what? But what? You shall not cross over. You shall not cross over. So Moses is there, and that's where he was buried, in the land of Moab. Of course, if we go to the book of Jude, we're able to see that Moses was brought back to life. We see, of course, Moses is with Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration. So we know that he is alive. He did not stay in the grave. But as we look here at this point, it looks as if this is, the end of the journey until the second coming. And the reason why Moses has not been permitted to enter into the land of Canaan, the earthly Canaan, is because of a little incident that happened at Kadesh, where instead of speaking to the rock, Moses had gotten so fed up, and if you watched the devotional this week on dealing with humbleness, Moses finally lost his cool. And he violently struck the rock instead of speaking to it. And because of that, he was not able to enter into the earthly Canaan. He asked God several different times. God eventually told him, don't talk to me anymore about this. Don't ask me about this. I've made the decision on this. You're not entering in. And there were some reasons for this. It wasn't God saying, well, you did a lot of faithful service and you made one little mistake in comparison to all the years of good service that you had, and because of that one little flub, that's it, you're not making it into eternity. It's not what God was saying. And as we look here and we see what God is wanting to relay to us, is to understand this. This is from the book Patriarchs and Prophets. We see here some great insight. It said, had not the life of Moses been marred with that one sin, how many? One. In failing to give God the glory of bringing water from the rock at Kadesh, he would have entered the promised land and would have been translated to heaven without seeing death. But because of one sin, and again, God's not being, punitive here. There was a reason for that, because as we look at why Moses did what he did, and I always look at that and say, I wouldn't have been hitting the rock with my staff, I would have been hitting them with my staff. It's something in which Moses, because he didn't follow the instruction, if God had translated Moses in the sight of Israel, it would have sent the wrong message, because they had rebellious hearts, and they would have thought, we can be rebellious too, we can have sin too, and not worry about facing consequences. Now, is that how God has arranged things? That we can just do whatever we want to and not face consequences? No. If I am going 85 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone, are there consequences that I could probably expect to happen, even if the police don't catch me, if I happen to be going through an area with a lot of cars and they're going 35 and I'm going 85? Yeah, right, I can get in an accident. I can kill people. I can kill myself. At the very least, I would probably get a ticket. Maybe have my license revoked. But that's consequences, right? Because this little sign that's white with black letters on it said 35, and I said, no, I saw something that said an 8 and a 5, and that's what I decided I wanted to go. I felt that it was like the appropriate speed for that place. That the road conditions allowed me to go that fast. There's consequences to our choices. But let's go back 40 years. Numbers chapter 14, verses 9 and 10. Right before our story that we're going to get into with Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Here we see that they've sent the spies into the promised land. How many spies were sent? 12, right? One for each tribe, right? And, it's interesting as we look at that here we have then these 12 spies that come back. And we have 2 that give a good report of the land. 10 give a bad report. Now, what I find interesting about this is that if all 10 of the other spies had given a good report and 2 spies had given a bad report, who would the congregation have listened to? The 2, right? It wasn't a matter of the number, it was a matter of what the news was. Oh, we went up into the land and there we look like grasshoppers in the sight of everybody, and it's just going to be impossible to take the land. And so if only 2 people had been saying that, the crowd would have been going like, oh, woe is us. The Lord's brought us up here to die. Moses, why have you brought us out into the desert to kill us? Of course, that's not the case. The 10 gave the bad report, but Joshua and Caleb gave a good report. No, the land's a good land. The people are afraid of us. Yeah, we might look like grasshoppers in their sight, but we don't feel like we're grasshoppers in our sight because we're God's children, and He's got this covered. And so here is Caleb, and he is saying in Numbers chapter 14, he says, only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. So what we see here is that Caleb gives a good report. He says it's possible because the Lord is with us. We're not doing this by ourselves. We're going up and we're going to take the land and do it through the power. And what was the response of the people? What did they decide to do? Here in verse 10. Stone him. What is that about? Don't kill the messenger? All the congregation said to stone them with stones. Kill them. Kill Joshua and Caleb because they say that it was possible to take the land. It's possible to do what God has said that He was going to promise them that He was going to do. I will give you the land. I will help you to inherit the land. We see so many times in the life of Israel that God fought for them, and all they had to do was stand by. To think, they're battling the Amalekites, and Moses is there, and as long as his hands are up, the battle's in their hands. Now, what kind of military strategy is that? Just have your leader keep his hands raised up, and you'll win. Right? It's not a matter of how many tanks or planes or bullets or anything like that you have. It's whether your leader's hands are up as he's praying and placing things in God's hands. If that's the case, you'll be victorious, right? If I was to go to West Point and present a talk and say, okay, for military strategy, I want you to do this. I want you to get your commanding officer, whoever the top guy is in this particular battlefield, and what you do is you have the chaplains join him on some hill somewhere and have him, because he might be kind of tired from having to stand for this battle. Let's have him sit down, and these chaplains just hold his hands up, and you guys talk to the Lord, pray to the Lord, praise the Lord, give glory to Him, and you guys will win any battle you go up, any foe, any battle you're going to win. What would they do with me? They'd probably want to stone me, yeah. Laugh me out of the room. Yeah, no, I don't think so. That's not military strategy. Not good strategy. So they want to stone Caleb and Joshua. And at this point, who intervenes? Who intervenes at this point? What does the text show us? What's right there? It says, now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. Before just a few? No, everybody. The glory of the Lord. So this is more than just the Shekinah glory that's there. This is, God's presence is there in the cloud. Just the same as God's presence is on Sinai when they get the 10 Commandments, when they hear God's voice speak. Here the glory of the Lord is there, and what happens? The people fall back. And for a while, that quelled the rebellion. what's interesting here is to look at what comes as we see some things here. It talked about rebelling. Don't rebel against the Lord. Well, the word for that is marad. That's the Hebrew word. And I thought this was interesting because it can mean rebelling against humans. It can mean rebelling against God. Neither one of those is good. But I thought it was interesting as being used poetically of light because we know light usually has a tendency to represent truth, right? What's the light of the Word of God? What's the truth of the Word of God? So it's not just merely rebelling against the Creator, it's also rebelling against His truth. So as we see here, they were rebelling against who? They were rebelling against Moses and Aaron and their leadership. They were rebelling against Joshua and Caleb and their report. They were rebelling against God, the Creator, and they were rebelling against the truth of God's Word. They had a great trifecta going on. And I'm amazed that at that point, right then and there, that people didn't start dying because of their sinful ways, their hearts being wrapped up in sin. That the glory of the Lord, that they were not able to withstand that and died, as opposed to just kind of slinking back to their tents. But God did thin the numbers after that because they decided that they were going to go up and go into the land. They were going to possess the land, even though God said to them through Moses, don't go. God's not with you. The ark's not with you. We're not coming out with you. If you go up, you're going to face certain doom. So some people decided that that wasn't good words, and they went anyways to try to possess the land, and they were utterly routed. Because God was not with them. Didn't matter what kind of battle tactics they had. Didn't matter how many they had in their little force going across to fight. God wasn't with them. Because they were rebelling. They were rebelling. And I think it's interesting, you go a little bit farther in this story here. This is Numbers 14:37, talking about the plague that then comes, because it wasn't just merely this battle that they go fight. Like I said, it's amazing that right then and there, when the glory of the Lord first appeared, but it's very soon revealed that God is the one being fought against. Because as we see here, it says, those very men who brought the evil report about the land died by the plague before the Lord. Now, what's interesting about the word plague that's here, this is the same word that's used for the plagues that fall on Egypt. And those plagues were what kind of judgment? Well, they're against the gods of Egypt. They were a divine judgment, right? This is a divine response to rebellion. And we're going to see this again. But as we look at this and we see this morning, the story doesn't end here. The rebellion is, kind of suppressed for a little bit, but hearts and minds are still processing things. And in this case, we get to Numbers 16, verses 1 and 2. Now notice who's mentioned here. You have Korah, and who is he a descendant of? Levi. You got Dathan and Abiram. Who are they descendants of? Reuben. All right. And they also took men with them, took other people with them. And we're going to stop right there before we get into verse 2. Who is Levi in the sense of the nation of Israel at this point? Why is Korah here in this story as a Levite important? Why are Dathan and Abiram as sons of Reuben important? Why is Reuben important? It's interesting that really what you have represented here in Levi and in Reuben is you have the spiritual leaders of Israel and you have the civil leaders of Israel. Because Reuben is who in birth order of Abraham's descendants? He's firstborn of Jacob, right? That means that, he's the literal firstborn. We've talked about how Joseph was viewed by Jacob as being the true firstborn because of his love for Rachel. But as we look here and we see, it's something where Reuben, we're the civil leaders, and who is this Moses guy that he should be in charge? And Korah, being a part of the family that is the spiritual leaders of Israel, well, why do they think that they're better than I am? I should be able to have just as much authority as they do, because guess what? Great-grandpa Levi was, we're all family. So I should be able to have a certain thing. So we look here and we see this little group of rebels, and I left out here, there is one other person that comes into play. His name is On. And what's interesting is it appears as if he may be a part of the rebellion at first, but he decides, no, this isn't such a great idea, and we don't see him mentioned in the rebellion again, just these three. And they come to Moses, and we are, going towards where we had our text this morning, but they come to Moses, and they come to him, and they say, with some of the children of Israel, 250 of the leaders. So it's interesting that we get this group of people that follows along. And when there's a rebellion, is there usually a group of people following in the wake? When there's things being stirred up? It's not just the leaders. They're dragging people along to their doom. So we look and we see that you have Korah, you have Dathan and Abiram. They take with them men of pens that we see. There's 250. They're leaders in Israel themselves, representatives of the congregation. As it finishes there in the sentence, it says they are what kind of men? Of renown. Right? So they have leadership responsibilities. They're well respected in the congregation. And they're with Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Here they come, this representation. As a pastor, I've had the opportunity, we will call it, to have met with various representations. Here comes the group. Well, pastor, and it's usually not too long, it's like, oh, well, I know where this conversation is going. I'm certain that Moses knew where this conversation was going. Because for the first 40 years of his life, what kind of training did Moses have? Civil. He had been trained as a future leader of Egypt, a future Pharaoh. Did pharaohs have problems with people rebelling? Yes. Do you think that probably Moses had some first-hand experience with rebellious people? Yes. So he sees the group coming, he's like, well, this isn't boding well. I know, I have a feeling this is not going to end well. Sadly, the thing is it's probably not going to end well for them, not as opposed to me. And then, of course, yes, he had 40 years as a shepherd, in which case sheep are less rebellious. They're just more of a hassle to try to herd. The only thing worse than herding sheep is cats. But sheep will test your patience. So as they are there, and they have come with their little group of people, Moses, you take too much upon yourself. You and Aaron. And notice what their claim is here. What do they claim for the congregation, for the people? They're all holy. Every one of them. And the Lord is among them. Now, the last time that we saw the Lord amongst the people of Israel, what was happening? Go back 2 chapters to 14. What was happening? There was rebellion. There was a plague. There was this attempt to try to go conquer Canaan. Was God with them? No. So I don't know what makes them think at this point that they're any holier than what they were back 2 chapters ago. But this is their claim. The whole congregation is holy. Every one of them. And the Lord is amongst all of them. So why do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? What makes you think that you have been put in charge? When did God die and leave you in charge of everything? So Moses responds to some of this, but what's interesting, if we go forward a few verses, it's interesting to note here, this didn't go away after there'd been some judgment from God. Here in Numbers 16:41, it says, on the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, you have killed the people of the Lord. You killed the holy people. You killed the people who the Lord was amongst. And what's interesting about this as we go through the story is, did Moses and Aaron actually come out and kill the people? No. What caused the people to die? The Lord opened up the earth. And I believe the case was that for those who were there with their censers, these other leaders, that as they came with censers before the temple, or before the sanctuary, the tabernacle, I believe that it was the actual unsheltered, unshielded glory of the Lord that came out, and that's why they died. Because they died in their sin. And that's what consumed them. It was their sin that consumed them. But yet they're still claiming, oh, well, you killed these holy people of God. And it wasn't even God that had killed these people. They killed themselves. Their own sins, their own attitudes, their own rebellious spirit killed them. And we're going to get to the application of this in a greater context as we move along here, because this story is a great micro view of the great controversy. But here in verses 5 and 7, going back a little bit here, but noticing again, this thought about the holiness of these people, of them being, in step with God, does not end even after God sends out judgment. And so here, starting in verse 5, it says, and he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, so this is Moses, tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy. So notice that this claim of, well, yeah, all the people are holy, well, God's going to show who that is. And will cause him to come near to him, that one whom he chooses he will cause to come near to him. Now, I want you to think about this because the answer gets really easy, really fast. Who was the only person who could enter into the most holy place? Aaron, as high priest, was the only one. Now, Moses did go in, but he was in a different position than what Aaron was at this point. But as we go forward, only the high priest, and only on the Day of Atonement. So only one, the one who God has chosen, will come near to him. And even that was with a need to be prepared and have the heart in the right place, or otherwise the individual sin of the high priest could cause him to die in the glory of the Lord, as he was there still in an unforgiven state. And so here in verse 7, Moses has them put fire in them, these censers they had, and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is holy, is the Holy One. And then I love how Moses turns this around. He says, you take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. And what's interesting is then he goes into and he says, I don't know what is really wrong with you, is kind of what he's saying. What kind of cluelessness you have, because the reality is that you're actually in a position of great leadership. It's something in which God has chosen you to minister to the children of Israel, and you are saying that's not good enough. We want more. We want the authority. We want to be able, and what's interesting, was Moses the one directing the path of where Israel was going? No. There was, and I don't know how I guess maybe they thought that Moses was a great magician. They were too wrapped up still in the thoughts of Egypt, and that they thought, well, he must be some great magician, and don't know exactly how he's getting that cloud to do what he wants it to do, but somehow he's getting that cloud to do what he wants it to do. And so somehow if we can get Moses' power, if we can get his special magic, we can control the cloud to go the direction we want it to go. And sometimes people are like that in the church. They think the direction the church is going is just the direction of people, when the direction the church is going is actually God leading. And that the leaders of the church, the spiritual leaders of the church, are directing things of their own accord, and that's not the case. They're just merely following what God is giving them to do. And as there is counsel in many, that the voice of God is heard and positive directions and steps are taken. But as we look here, and this is it's not on the screen, but Numbers 16, 8 through 11 is where you can find this, where Moses says, "Is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord and to stand before the congregation to serve them? And that he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi with you? Are you seeking the priesthood also? Therefore you and all your company gathered together against the Lord. And what is Aaron to you that you're complaining against him?" And he also talks to Dathan and Abiram. Says, "Okay, you guys, let's have a talk." "Oh, no, we're not coming. We're not going to that meeting. You'll put our eyes out." So in their mind, they had worked up this narrative in their mind as to what Moses was like. He was this petty, vindictive, cruel dictator who was going to put their eyes out because they were challenging the authority of Moses. But whose authority was being challenged? The Lord's authority was being challenged. No, we know what you're doing. Matter of fact, you haven't even brought us up to a land full of milk and honey. Well, wait a second. Moses had Moses gotten them to Canaan? Who kept them out of Canaan? They kept themselves out of Canaan. It wasn't God saying, "Well, I brought you here, but you know what? I changed my mind. I think it's going to be good to let you wander in the desert for 40 years because I want to watch you have to figure out how to live in the desert for 40 years. Matter of fact, I'm not going to provide you with anything. You're going to have to take care of everything yourself. I want to see how you can do things all on your own. I'm going to toughen you up. And then 40 years later, when you come back, you'll be a force that is not going to be able to be reckoned with." Right? That wasn't what happened. God had got them through the leadership that he had provided through Moses to the doorstep of Canaan, and they turned back. They took the report of 10 people who were of obviously not great character, and they wouldn't listen to the 2 who said, "No, God's on our side. We can do this." The fear of the people is based on the fact that the Lord is with us. They're fearful of us because they see God is with us. That's not what happens. "You'll put our eyes out, so we will not come up." And then we hit this here, verse 19. This just shows what rebellion does, the arrogance that rebellion creates. Because as Korah is there, the time comes, they come with their censers. And who does Korah bring with him? He gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of the meeting. "Hey guys, come on, watch this. You're going to see how I win. This is going to be great. Come on." Gathers them all around. What does they say about pride? Comes before the fall. There's a lot of truth to that statement in the context of this story and looking at its greater implications. Watch this, guys. And as they're there, the whole congregation is there. The glory of the Lord appeared once again to all of the congregation. Now, I don't think all of the congregation was necessarily there on Korah's side going like, yay for Korah. But the majority of the people that were there, I think probably that was their thought. Tired of this wandering in the desert, tired of this manna stuff. We should have been to the promised land long before this. Theologians look at the journey, and even just you can look at a map and just kind of figure some things out, that they should have been able to have made the promised land in a couple of weeks. But it hadn't taken a couple of weeks. It was something that as we look and we see, a year had basically gone by, and they still weren't in the promised land. Well, the reason was because they weren't ready for the promised land yet. God was trying to prepare them. The tabernacle hadn't been built. There was a need to have their hearts and minds prepared. They were having to relearn some things about having a stronger faith in God. So God was trying to prepare them. But instead of being ready, when given the opportunity, they failed. And God starts speaking here. Says, get away from them, because I'm going to deal with this. For Dathan and Abiram, the earth opened up and got sucked in. For Korah, with the followers that were following him, fire came out. But we see here that the real reason, number 1638, as to why these individuals died is why. These men who sinned against their own souls. See, rebellion against God is showing that sin reigns in the heart. And if sin reigns in the heart, when in the glory of God, and the sin is consumed, well, if it's rooted in, it consumes that which the sin is rooted in this case, those who were in rebellion. So when we get to the end of time, when we look at the end of the 1,000 years, when Jesus returns and there is that last great white throne judgment, those who die at that period of time is because they have not let go of their sin. It is intertwined in their lives. And so when God's glory goes out across the earth and it is unmitigated, it is not restrained, it is not dimmed down, it is not shielded, it is put forth in its fullness, those of us who are there who have Christ fully as our character, we stand there and it's like, to stand in the glory of God, how great is this? Whereas those who are sinful and have not relinquished their sin but are in full rebellion against God, they are consumed. They die. Their sin consumes them. We get back to this here. You've killed the people of the Lord. They were holy. So even seeing all of this, did it change the rebellious spirit of the people? No. And the plague began. And it's interesting who stayed the plague. Through a lot of this, you find Moses is mentioned more so than Aaron, not because Aaron wasn't a part, but just because a lot of the accusations came against Moses as the top leader. But Moses and Aaron, you'd often find them, prostrated there on the ground, praying to the Lord. And Moses tells Aaron at this point, he says, get your censer. Get the incense in there. Get the holy fire in there. Go out amongst the people, because the plague has begun. And as Moses had sent Aaron out, and as he's pleading with the Lord, Aaron is out and he is staying the plague on the people. And there's times here in this part of the story, the history of Israel, that God again offers to Moses. He says, separate yourself, I'll make of you a mighty nation. A selfish worldly leader would have said, that sounds pretty good. I like that idea. I'm tired of being the captain of a ship of fools. I'd rather be a captain of a ship of my own design. I'd rather build my own empire. That'd be fantastic. I'll be in charge of, great, okay, you do your thing, I'm heading over here. Let's see how this goes. But that wasn't the heart of Moses. Moses showed that he had concern for the people just as God had concern for the people. But it was something to show that God had displeasure in their sin. So the plague has stayed. The sad thing is it shows us that rebellion ends only in death. And this isn't where the story ended either. We find that 14,000 people died. But this helps us to understand something, that all rebellion is satanic in origin. All rebellion is satanic in origin. Not resistance, rebellion. Because as we look in this world, there are those who are resisting Satan's kingdom, yes? Hopefully that's what we're doing. We're resisting Satan's influence in this world. Because are we rebelling? Who's the rebel? Satan is, right? And so as we look at true rebellions in this world, all true rebellions are satanic in origin. Whether it's on a national level or whether it comes down to in the home or even within the church. All rebellion is satanic in origin. Because as we look at this and we see the children of Israel, and again, Moses, there was one last thing that God did. He took that rod of Aaron's, and he had everybody bring a rod from all the different tribes, and they put those in the sanctuary. And what happened to Aaron's rod? It not only budded, it blossomed, and it had almonds on it. Now, I've lived in Southern California. We had a house that we had an almond tree. And it comes in a progression, right? First the tree, during the wintertime, it's like it is here. No leaves on it. Summertime or springtime comes, little buds pop out, and you start getting the buds there. And then after that, the leaves finally come out. Then the thing is the flowers come out, and then the almonds come after that. It's not all at once. And it's definitely on a tree that's rooted in the ground, not some stick that looks pretty dead. So it would seem to me it's pretty clear who God had chosen as a leader. And of course that rod ended up in there as a witness before God. And so as we see this here, as we look at this here, it's important to recognize, we're familiar with the text in Isaiah 14 that deals with Lucifer. And I'm going to read these for you. Like I said, it's not on the screen. It says, "But for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit." Right? That's what Satan is, the architect of rebellion. This is where this all started at. Right? And as we look at this great controversy theme between Jesus and Satan, between God's kingdom and Satan's kingdom, Satan's kingdom is one of rebellion. This is why we say all rebellion is satanic in origin. And that as we look and we see that when people are fighting against the leadership that God has placed into the church, that they're not fighting against the leaders, they're fighting against who? The Lord. They're in rebellion against Him. I got to tell you, as pastor, and I can agree, or probably some of the elders would agree with this too, they would love that the Lord hadn't called them into that position. Because there's a lot of burdens there. There's a lot of headaches there. If one of these days I'll give my testimony, but if it was up to me, I would be with Josh right now. He would be with his mechanical engineering. I would be dealing with all those fluid dynamics because my original thought was aeronautical engineering. That's what I wanted to do. That was what I had a passion for that. But that's not what God wanted me to do. And if I had had a choice, and if you talk with my parents, they'll reaffirm this for you, I did not want to be a pastor. I argued with God. Actually, there was a 2-week period I argued with God vehemently. Absolutely not. I grew up in the church. I knew what pastors had to deal with, and I had no desire to have any part of that. No way whatsoever. I was already sitting on a church board, and that was contentious enough. I didn't want to be the one that was the person that had the headship, leadership of that, because that's a pain in the neck. Because like I was saying, we talk about being sheeple. I think we're more like cat people. Because like I said, trying to herd congregations sometimes is more like herding cats than it is sheep. At least sheep you can kind of get going in the right direction. When you get one going in the right direction, you get them all going in the right direction. When you're trying to herd cats, all going all over the place. Right, Ron? Right, Michael? Right, Chet? Randy's not here. I can't pick on him. Stephen, right, as elders in the church, as we're trying to keep things together. Robert, sometimes keeping things together as elders of the church, and it's going all over the place. Andy, you're there in Delaware. Elizabeth, you're there in Springfield. This isn't to be casting a dispersion on you as church members, but it's a challenge to be in spiritual leadership, especially. I'm certain that Moses was like, boy, if it was like commanding the Egyptian army, this would be so much easier. Because I would order the command, and they would follow the command, because if they didn't follow the command, it would be off with their head. Simple as that. Life would be great. Of course, I'd have that many less in the army real fast. But this is what happened, right? And I think it's interesting to think of how Korah brought everybody with him to the tabernacle. Oh, watch what's going to happen. I'm going to show how I'm actually in charge. And I can just see Lucifer as he's there, and he's like, hey, come on, everybody. I'm going to go challenge God. Come watch this. And there was war in heaven. And 1/3 of the angels were cast out. Yeah, that went real well. Saw how great that worked. When the end comes, Satan is there. He is consumed by his sin. The angels that have fallen are consumed by their sin. We've already talked about the rest of the fallen world around us, the people who aren't following Jesus, what happens. So yes, all rebellion is satanic in origin. So I want to put this in a little bit of perspective, and this isn't to necessarily give a talk to say, yeah, don't ever go against the pastor, don't ever counter any of the leaders in the church. Sometimes the leaders are wrong. Sometimes it must be understood that true leadership is us coming together and having a discussion about things and making a concise decision on things. I cannot tell you the number of times that I had a decision that was made, and it's not what I wanted as the outcome, but it was the best outcome because God was in charge of things. Excuse me. I thought that, yeah, that would be great. Let's do it this way. And I got voted down. As a matter of fact, when it comes to board meetings, I can't vote unless it's a tie, to break a tie. That's the only time I can vote at a board meeting or a business meeting, is if there's a tie. Otherwise, all of the voting power is in your hands. I can make suggestions. I can say this should be maybe what we need to think about. But when it comes down to it, the power doesn't reside with me. That's okay. I'm happy with that. That's why I like to be at board meetings and get people to participate. It's nice when it's a dialogue and it's not a monologue. But as we look, we see, does God have principles about leadership for his church? And I believe he does. And forgive me for putting this as a paraphrase, my paraphrase, but looking at Hebrews chapter 13, starting in verse 17. Humbly follow the Christ-like leaders God is called to minister over his flock, not rebelling against them like Israel of old, for they are keeping watch over you according to their calling from the deceptions of Satan. For one day they will be held accountable to our Father for any of their willful neglect or concern over you. Instead, let them minister in joy, not being exasperated by your rebellion against the Lord, for this would only be detrimental to your spiritual healing and reconciliation with God. I believe that gets at a better understanding of what Paul is talking about for our ears today. That we don't recognize. And so like I said, this goes up the chain too. And the Adventist church, I have bosses who have bosses who have bosses, all the way up to Elder Wilson as the president of the General Conference. And of course, all of our bosses even higher than that. But as we look at that and we see there's accountability that's there that they have, right? When the end comes, if they haven't been faithful, who's responsible? They are. If we haven't been responsible, who's responsible? We are. And I got to tell you, when a church is in conflict, when there is rebellion taking place, and some of you here, some of you in Till Plains have had this experience. When there is rebellion taking place in the church, when there's severe conflict, is it a joyful experience? No. As a matter of fact, that's the times when you're going like, I'm a Christian again. Why? Why? It's like, it's easier just to worship at home. I'll just show up and, I'll sit in the pew and I'll go home after everything's done. I'm not going to get involved with anything because it's just too much of a hassle. It's too painful. It hurts too much. I had one church member one time tell me, church should run like a business. I said, no, you don't want me to run church like a business. He says, why not? I said, because I'd have to fire most all of you because you don't do your jobs. And he's like, what? So go think about that for a bit. But that's what we look at. When God has provided for us Christ-like leaders, then let's be supportive. I really appreciate the fact that, I see on the prayer list, the prayer video, that there's prayers for me and my family. Because I got to tell you, but be praying for your elders too. Be praying for your deacons and your deaconesses. Pray for your treasurers and your clerks. Those officers of the church, those that have watch over the congregation, because it's not just my family that Satan is trying to attack, but it's the other spiritual leadership in the church that Satan is trying to attack. He's doing a good enough job with the regular membership. How much effort does he put into the leadership? Pray for our conference leaders on up the ladder. Each and every one. Why? So that we can have, as Paul's talking here, so that the ministering can be for our benefit with joy. There's excitement, there's joy. It's not something that's like, oh, I'd like to quit. Have you ever had one of those jobs you got up every day and you said, I quit? And you still trudged off to work that day? I'm going to quit when I get there. That's it. This is my last day. And you come home and you're like, oh, well, I made it through another day. Get up the next day. I'm going to quit. Now, I don't have that problem with this job, this ministry. Some of that's because I'm not the one who put myself into the position that I'm in. That's what God called me to. But as we look at this and we see it, it can be a struggle. And it's not something that the church is it's beneficial for the church. It's not something that helps the church. Because when people come in and there's conflict in the church, do you think that those people who are visiting don't notice that? Or does it stick out like a sore thumb? They might not be able to quite put their finger on it. So I don't want to pick on Brian and Jennifer, but as you came in today, do you notice that there's a lot of conflict in our church? Does it seem that to be the case? And they're shaking their head no. Right? So good testimony. Thank you for being a part of that. Now, there are some churches that have conflict, and you walk in and it's like, no, well, go back out of this way. And then the church wonders, why aren't we growing? Why are we having struggles and challenges and trying to get all kinds of people come and visit us, but nobody stays? I'll tell you why they don't stay. They sense all of that. You know why our young people struggle with all of that is because they see the hypocrisy. Oh yeah, they talk friendly to each other, but they hate each other's guts. And as they get older, they make decisions to say, well, I might stay in the church, but I'm not going to stay in that one. I'm going to a different congregation. A lot of young people, they make the decision and say, well, they haven't been able to reconcile things, and they say, if that's what God's like, I don't want to have any part with that. I had that when I was in Thailand. There were people, unfortunately, that, I love Jesus, but I see how you people treat each other as Christians. I don't want to be a part of that. And it's a sad thing because that's rebellion, right? All rebellion is satanic in origin. So we look this morning and we see that we can look at this story and we can learn from it. We can say, I'd like to be like Jesus, or you can say, I'd like to be like Satan. The choice is yours. God's not going to prevent you if you say, I'd like to be like Satan. He's not going to say to you, okay, well, that's not a choice I'm going to allow you to make and bar you from that. Now, he's going to do some things to try to dissuade you from that. But if you're bent on that, if we would say even the phrase, if you're hell-bent on that, because that's where that's going to end up at, he allows that. He gives us free choice. But that's not what he wants. And so as we look this morning and we see what God is doing, as we see God has called leaders, as we're struggling with that, let us not be rebels without a clue, but let us be followers of Jesus who understand, who care, have compassion, and that are all interested in being ministers of the gospel, because we are told that we are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and we should all be holy before the Lord. We should all go forward with not our heads in the bucket going like, yeah, it's all good. Right? May the Lord add a blessing to this message. May we look at ourselves. Are we in rebellion? Are we supporting our leadership? Are we faithful leaders? Because we're all trying to get off this planet, and we're trying to take as many people with us. Together, yes.